Well, hello again sports fans. I've had to replace the GPS unit on my Valantex Ranger. And while it initially seemed to work, I've been having problems using the GPS related functions in the Tornado autopilot. This clip from an earlier flight shows what I mean. The on-screen display is telling me that I've got a good GPS fix and the speed and altitude data seem to be updating correctly. So it looks like the new GPS module is working okay, so I slip it into autopilot mode and the plane turns for the first waypoint. It seems to settle on a course in roughly the right direction and seems to be maintaining altitude, but it seems to be doing a lot of rolling from left to right as it travels, which is a bit disconcerting. I've speeded this next section of the video up, and as you can see it emphasises that rolling movement from side to side. It still seems to be maintaining a rough heading in the right direction at the right altitude, but there's something seriously wrong. And given that I've changed out the GPS antenna, I'd have to think that would be the thing that's causing the problem. So messing around with the control throws and the gains on the Cyclops Tornado didn't have any effect at all. So I plugged the unit into U-Center to have a look at what was happening, and this is what I saw. The satellite reception isn't just rising and falling as it normally does. There are some satellites that are just dropping out completely. I take a punt that it might be associated with the 10 Hz refresh rate that I've set to match the Tornado original, and that turns out to be the case. As soon as I drop it from 10 down to 5 Hz, the satellite reception stabilises and starts behaving as I normally expect it to. So I stick it back in the Ranger and head out to the field to give it a bit of a test run, and I couldn't have picked a more glorious late autumn day. It's late afternoon and everybody else has gone home, so I take a vape to see if it's alright to launch from the pits area just this once, and it's carried. So I'm launching it in manual mode, so the GPS function isn't really coming into question at this point. I'll just gain a reasonable bit of altitude before slipping it into loiter mode to do my first test. So I take it up to around about 100 metres and flick the switch, and she immediately banks and starts circling to the right, which is how it's been configured to operate. And there's about a 10k wind blowing, and taking that into consideration, it's very stable. Certainly it's 500% on what it was doing before I changed the GPS settings. So I'm very happy so far at this point. So next I decided to check out the autopilot function, which is going to navigate between, I think, 4 waypoints that I've set up. This was the function that was giving me the most grief on the last few flights, where I've been trying to fly a set search pattern. So she starts heading for the first waypoint, and I'm really pleased to see that there's no sign of the rolling that I was experiencing in that earlier clip that I showed. The 10k wind is coming pretty well straight down this valley, so taking that into consideration, all of the variations in attitude can be really attributed to that wind. So she reaches the first waypoint and turns for the next, which is at a slightly higher altitude, so there's a little bit of climbing going on, but once again, nice and stable. I'm pretty pleased with how it's going. I've set each of these waypoints at slightly higher altitudes, with the last one, point D, being up at 300 metres. So she reaches point C, turns around and starts heading basically straight over home, but climbing up to about 300 metres, which I won't bore you with. So needless to say, I'm pretty happy at this point. All the rolling and zigzag path seems to have disappeared. So the only thing left for me to do is to test the return to home mode, which I've done here. She turns around immediately and she starts heading straight back and is maintaining a nice level course with slight variations, which are due to the wind, which is coming from the left on this particular part of the flight. Now that I'm looking at the video, I can see she actually comes in quite a bit south of the home point, and I'm not sure whether that's because I put some aileron input in or not, but either way she straightens up, comes home and starts to do the right-hand circles that it's programmed to do. I'll just have to keep an eye on that next time I use the return to home mode. But for the moment I'm very happy. The Tornado is functioning as it should, and I'm back to having a high level of confidence in the performance of the Ranger. So with all the tests successfully completed, I decided to bring it in for a landing. I'm still not used to this business of landing while I've still got any electricity left in the battery, but hopefully it's something I do become accustomed to fairly quickly. So now that the replacement GPS unit seems to be working, I start thinking about what has gone wrong with the original unit. Even though the Tornado wasn't able to get a satellite fix, the GPS unit itself seemed to be working. The LED was glowing, and when I hooked it up to the U-Center evaluation software, I could see that it was receiving messages from GPS satellites. It was displaying GPS coordinates, but it wasn't displaying any satellites on the display windows that U-Center provides. I'm not very familiar with U-Center, but I was able to locate this screen, which seems to allow you to configure which groups of satellites you want your GPS unit to look for. I was a bit surprised to see that none of them were enabled, and I decided, well, I'll enable a couple and see what happens, and immediately satellites started appearing in the screens. I've no idea what the original configuration was, but I decided I'll just go with what seemed to be working on the screen. So for this flight I've replaced the GPS unit with my resurrected original stock unit, and I'll be doing similar tests to what I was doing on the first one. So once again I'm starting out in manual mode and climbing to a safe altitude before commencing the tests of the autonomous flight modes. I won't subject you to the footage from all of those tests, but I've left this section of the waypoint test in just to demonstrate that the rolling issue isn't present in the original GPS unit either. So I'm pretty happy with how it's going. So at this point I'm just experimenting a little bit to see what the effect of aileron input is while I'm in autopilot mode, and it seems I've got a fair bit of control. So I've decided I'm going to have a bit of a fly up towards the top of Mount Tennant and see how things go. So I fly out to the northwest a little to give myself room to gain the altitude that I'll need to get up to the top of the mountain. I'm not real sure how high I'm going to go, but one of the things I haven't yet done with the Ranger is test how well it glides with the motor off. So I think that's what I'll do, head out towards the mountain, turn the motor off and glide back into the wind and see how it goes. starting to get a little bit of video breakup because of the altitude and the angle down to my base station, so I'm just messing around with the antenna alignment. So the Ranger seems like it'd be happy to tool around up here for the rest of the day without the motor. But I've missed lunch and I'm a bit peckish, so I decide I'm going to have to fly it down closer to the ground to land. So that was with the original Tornado GPS at the 10 Hz refresh rate. I must admit I didn't notice a lot of difference.